let's bring our dear friend Lon Harris on.
Our editorial director
is going to talk to us about a founder hack. And this, Lon, is one that I adore. It's from Matt Turk and is kind of one of those, what if we took the world and turned it upside down ideas?
Okay.
Yeah, he tweeted this the other day. I thought it was interesting. A few quotes and how they would apply to a few of our biggest, sort of most successful startup companies, tech companies at the moment. Don't do services. Well, but what about Palantir? Hardware is hard. Palantir, excuse me. Hardware is hard. What about NVIDIA, Apple, Tesla, SpaceX? Selling to the government is awful. What about Anduril? So generic startup advice is often terribly wrong, is his conclusion based on all of these sort of conventional wisdom gone wrong ideas.
Well, you got to parse each one of them, or two of the three kind of overlap. Hardware is hard, selling to the government is awful. If you look at SpaceX and Anduril, they're both doing both of those things. Hardware is incredibly hard. Tesla and SpaceX showed, and NVIDIA, Apple, of course, did it a long time ago, but that startups could actually do hardware. Hardware is hard is a warning. It's not necessarily don't do it. It's just going to be super capital intensive. And selling to the government is awful. The way I would say it, instead of awful, it's slow, it's time consuming. So you put those two together, what that means is if you do succeed, you have a great moat. Incredibly hard to displace a company like SpaceX and those contracts because, gosh, look at how much has been invested over 15 years in that company and their technology. So it is good advice for founders to know that hardware is hard. It's great advice to know selling to the government is difficult. I can tell you in education, a perfect example, the companies and the startups that tried to sell to the government for education had a really hard time.
Yep.
The cycle was incredibly long, incredibly slow. The people who then sold directly to consumers, Duolingo for language, Brilliant.org, one of our startups for math, programming, etc., or in the healthcare space, Fitbod and NutriSense and Calm from our portfolio did wonderfully. And you can actually hybrid this, Lon. Sell to consumers first, perfect it, and then upsell to the government. I think Calm.com and some of those other folks in the wellness space now, they are going to sell not just to consumers, but maybe they get covered by healthcare in their second decade. So you can kind of thread the needle, which is get that immediate feedback from customers, make it work with them, and then the low, slow, methodical, larger purchase orders from corporations can come in after that. So
I was reminded a little bit of what Castellian was saying, Brian from Castellian, when he was on the show a few weeks ago, because they obviously, as a defense contractor, this is a huge issue for them. It's very difficult to do sort of open R&D like you normally would as a startup because your product have to sell to this one buyer that has very specific taste. But he sort of suggested that that's starting to change, that the government is starting to understand better about how to work with startups and sort of modify some of those difficulties. So we may be in sort of a hybrid adjustment period for this overall.
I want to bring up, though, some more comments about this. So Blake Scholl is the guy behind Boom Aerospace. We've talked about this company a lot on the show. Boom is building the supersonic jet. Someone did a tweet a couple of days ago in a similar vein that said, so the whole hardware is capital intensive bit is basically fake. And they have a table that shows that Uber and Databricks and Stripe and OpenAI raised bajillions of dollars, often more than companies that are building physical things. And Blake had a really interesting kind of quote tweet to this. He said, Boom has raised just over $600 million. So far, we've done a boomless supersonic jet and designed a supersonic airliner. And here's the thing. If I knew on day one what I know today, we could have done this for $200 million. If we execute well, we can ship with less VC than any of these companies. That to me speaks a lot about maybe people did take the hardware as hard as more of a warning off, Jason, as opposed to just a warning.